Light. I mean, think about it. It's the first thing we see when we wake up and the last thing we switch off at night. It's the energy that powers our entire planet, and it's a symbol that guides our lives. It's so fundamental, so universal that we almost never stop to ask a really simple question: what exactly is it? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into that very question, but through two totally different lenses: the story that science tells and the story that scripture tells. So here's the plan. First, we'll start with our shared everyday experience with light. Then, we're diving into the incredible, mind bending story of what science has discovered about its physical nature. After that, we'll switch gears and explore the rich, metaphorical story the Bible tells about light's spiritual meaning. And finally, we'll bring these two powerful ways of seeing together and see what we find. Okay, before we get into quantum physics or ancient texts, let's just start with something we all know and feel. Light is just a constant in our lives, isn't it? On the most massive scale, you've got the sun, blasting light across 93 million miles to literally give life to our world. And then, on the most human scale, you have a campfire, something that's meant community, safety, and warmth for us since, well, forever. It feels like such a simple question, but this one little question has fueled centuries of debate and discovery, both in the lab and, in the soul. And the answers people have come up with, they are anything but simple. So, let's start with the scientific side of things. Honestly, the quest to define light plays out like a fantastic detective story, with all these brilliant minds each adding a piece to the puzzle, only to realize the mystery was getting deeper and stranger than they ever imagined. Our little investigation here is going to take us through 4 centuries of absolute genius. We start with Newton. Then Thomas Young comes along and throws a huge curveball. After that, Maxwell connects it all on his grand unified theory. And then Einstein just blows the whole thing wide open, taking us right into the weird world of quantum physics. Okay, so back in the 17th century, the one and only Isaac Newton was pretty sure that light was a stream of tiny, super-fast particles. He called them corpuscles. And you know what? It made a lot of sense. It explained why light travels in a straight line and how it bounces off a mirror, kind of like tiny little billiard balls. But then everything changed. In the early 1800s, a guy named Thomas Young did one of the most famous experiments in the history of physics. He passed light through two tiny slits, and what he saw wasn't two spots of light. He saw a pattern of bright and dark stripes. This was undeniable proof of wave behavior, just like ripples interfering in a pond. And just like that, Newton's particle idea was in big, big trouble. The wave theory got a huge shot in the arm in the 19th century. A physicist named James Clerk Maxwell came up with these incredible equations that connected electricity and magnetism. And get this, his equations predicted that electromagnetic waves should exist and that they should travel at, yep, you guessed it, the speed of light. It was an unbelievable discovery. Light was just one part of this huge family of waves, right there with radio waves, microwaves, and X-rays. So light is a wave. The debate's over, case closed, right? Well, not so fast. Physics had another plot twist in store. As science moved into the 20th century, a brand new mystery popped up that the wave theory just couldn't explain at all. And that mystery was the photoelectro effect. Scientists noticed that if you shine light on a piece of metal, it can actually knock electrons right off. It was Albert Einstein who figured out this could only happen if light wasn't a continuous wave, but was instead a stream of little energy bullets. He called them quanta. Today, we call them photons. And just like that, the particle theory was back from the dead. This left physicists scratching their heads, with a total paradox on their hands. Some experiments proved, without a doubt, that light was a wave, and other experiments proved, without a doubt, that it was a particle. So, which is it? How on earth could it be both? The answer is one of the weirdest and most fundamental ideas in all of science: wave-particle duality. It turns out, down at the quantum level, light doesn't have to pick a side. It's both. It acts like a wave and it acts like a particle. It's not either or, it's somehow both and. And that right there just shows you how strange and beautiful our universe really is. The light that's letting you see this right now is, at this very moment, behaving like both a wave spread out in space and a single particle hitting a single point. It's a deep mystery that we figured out how to describe, even if we can't really wrap our heads around it.
Okay, so that's the scientific story. It's a journey from simple particles to elegant waves and finally to this bizarre quantum reality that light is both at the same time. But science isn't the only way we've tried to make sense of light. There's another, much older story, one that isn't looking for how it works, but for what it means.
Now, in the Bible, light isn't really a phenomenon you measure with instruments. It's a symbol you try to understand. It's this powerful, running metaphor for God, for truth, and for life itself. And the story starts right at the very beginning. In the book of Genesis, the absolute first thing God speaks into existence is light. That verse there translates to, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." It is the foundational act of creation.
But as you read through scripture, you see that light becomes so much more than just a physical thing. It starts to represent God's own essence. First John says God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. It's also talked about as the source of spiritual life and understanding. And it's seen as a divine guide, like a lamp that shows people the right way to live.
This whole idea gets taken a step further in the New Testament. The Gospel of John, for example, talks about Jesus being this true light coming into the world, almost like a physical embodiment of that divine illumination, here to bring truth and life to everyone.
And the whole story kind of comes full circle at the very end of the Bible. The book of Revelation describes this ultimate, perfected reality where things like the sun and moon aren't even needed anymore. Why? Because the very presence and glory of God will be the light for everything. So in this story, light begins as God's creation and ends up as God's very presence. So we have these two really deep, really powerful stories about the exact same thing. How do they actually stack up against each other?
Well, when you put them side by side like this, you realize they're not really in conflict because they're not trying to answer the same question. Science describes what light is, a physical phenomenon, an electromagnetic wave, a particle called a photon. The Bible describes what light means, a divine creation, a metaphor for truth, and the very presence of God.
And that really gets to the core of it, doesn't it? The scientific perspective is all about trying to measure, predict, and define light, to figure out how it works. The biblical perspective is a search for meaning and purpose. It asks what light can teach us and how it can guide us.
So in the end, we're left with this really interesting duality. One kind of light we study in a lab with lasers and detectors. The other kind of light we seek in prayer and in scripture. One powers our technology. The other can inspire our hope. So the final question for us is this. How do these two completely different ways of seeing light, the physical and the metaphysical, both work together to illuminate our world?